Hey, what's that say in the lower right-hand corner? Oh boy, I'm in for it now. The best thing you can say about Micronics is they're not as bad as they used to be. Bloody Warriors is an RPG, and it's nowhere near as bad as the other Micronics RPGs I've played. You know, the RPGs that duke it out for the title of Worst RPG on the Famicom. This one's just severely mediocre to the point that no one would want to play it. In fact, my box copy has 2 store price tags on it. One with the original retail price of 6,200 yen, and one with the clearance price of 980 yen. The kid who paid 980 yen got ripped off. Since this is a game published by Toei Animation, it raises the question, what is this based on? And that's actually a more complicated question than it might seem. The game even has a subtitle, Shango Troops Strike Back, so it has to be the sequel to something. At the time of its release, this was the only thing for Bloody Warriors, but I believe they were trying to develop Bloody Warriors into a property, and in the end, this was the only thing that came out. Bloody Warriors was created by Go Imaizumi. That's Go like Van Gogh. If you're not familiar with them, they created Pepsi Man. Imaizumi is an enormous fan of Western comics, science fiction, and fantasy, and because of the heavy influences on his work, most Japanese players thought that this was a Western-developed game. They did revisit Bloody Warriors, releasing a comic called Pre-Bloody Warriors. Besides being a distinctive artist, Imaizumi also performs as a drag queen where they dress up as American superheroines. That doesn't have anything to do with Bloody Warriors, I just wanted to mention it. The plot of Bloody Warriors is that there's an evil cult that's taken over the world, and you're playing as the predestined king, who has to collect 8 sacred stones before defeating the leader of the cult. Now, with one exception, this is the most basic RPG you'll ever play. Even the menus are basic. When you hit A while walking around, you've got Talk, Inventory, and Examine. And that is it. You start out with no equipment in a town that has exactly one shop, the inn. In fact, every town I went to as I played only had one thing in it. The second town had an items shop, the third town had an inn. Fortunately, those 2 towns were right next to each other, since you pretty much have to sleep at an inn to recover health. In combat, your options are to fight, run away, or use item. That's it. It's so basic that they give you the option for auto combat at the start of every fight, and 99% of the time you should just go ahead and use it. At the start of the game, you're told you have to complete a trial, which consists of walking over to a cave and beating a boss there. The boss has 100 hit points. One of the very few nice things in the combat is that you can see how many hit points the enemies have. And since you can't get any healing items or anything like that, you have to level up until you can outpace his damage. There's exactly 2 kinds of enemies that will attack you before you reach that boss. Wolves and bats. Okay, I actually found a small section where there's a 3rd type of enemy that heavily outlevels you, probably because of a little bit of sloppy code on the overworld map. But since the experience gained from defeating those monsters doesn't outweigh how many hit points you'll lose, you're not going to be doing your grinding there. So instead you have to fight a whole lot of wolves and bats. I couldn't beat the boss until I was level 5, which was about 60 fights. Your stat gains when you level up are randomized, but they don't tell you what they are. You'll have to go into your status to check that. With the boss defeated, you can go on to the next town, and there you're told that a bunch of people have been abducted, along with the village's treasure. So off you go to a tower in the desert, where you learn about the one trick in the game, pushing rocks to find entrances. And inside you have another boss fight that is the only fight in the tower, and rescue a few people. Now it might look like this guy is joining your party, but he really isn't. There are people who will join your party, I just never reached them. When you leave the tower, you hit the one major gimmick of Bloody Warriors. Sometimes, instead of the regular RPG combat, you get a strategic battle. And here's where the guy who joined me in the tower comes in handy. This is still very simple, you just maneuver your forces until they come into contact with each other, and then fight. It's 2-on-1 against a basic troop here, so they really had no chance. With that dabbling into strategy over, you head to the next dungeon, which is just 3 bosses in a row. And these bosses aren't physically tough, but they have 200, 300, and 400 hit points. So it's really a question of, are you carrying enough healing items? Fortunately, they don't respawn if you leave for healing and then come back. If you manage to get past them, then you get the best armor and weapon in the game. No, seriously, they give you the best weapon and armor in the game right here. This is actually where I had to stop, but I didn't see any hope of Bloody Warrior improving from this point. One nice feature about the game is that you can save anywhere just by hitting the select button. If you die in combat, you go back to the last town you were in and lose half your money, so just save often. Despite being a nothing RPG, Bloody Warriors has a strange following in Japan. I found a surprisingly large number of fan pages for it. Apparently what people really like about the game is the graphic style, which also happens to be the only positive comment I have about Bloody Warriors. It's a nothing RPG. It's basically the minimum acceptable product for an RPG. The best thing I can say about it is that it introduced me to Goh Imaizumi. I'm going to see if I can track down some of their other work, including that pre-Bloody Warriors comic they made. But I doubt I'll ever play the game again.